So, welcome everybody to the fourth in a series of circular table talks, which are brought to you by We Don't Have Time TV and We Don't Have Time, which is the world's largest review app for climate solutions, with our partner Ragn-Sells. Ragn-Sells is a Nordic environmental company which is really at the cutting edge of the circular economy as it relates to waste.
Hi, I'm Ingmar Renzo and I'm the founder of We Don't Have Time. We are a social network platform and a review platform for the climate. And what you could do on our platform is you could give reviews to leaders, corporate leaders, political leaders about what they do, good or bad, for the climate. So if you see something that you don't like, you could give them a climate warning. And we will send this climate warning to the leader and have them to answer, have them to change, and put pressure on that issue. But you could also send climate love. If you see something that someone that are doing something great for the climate, and to encourage that and to share that to the world so more people will look up to that action and do the same. And I think love is actually something that could work very, very well in order to solve the climate crisis. We can't just focus on the problem. We must also focus on the good action, what's actually out there that are working for solutions. And how this works, I could just show you a little bit examples here. Here is a climate love from a company called Houdini that actually have given a climate love to an NGO called Ecocide Law of Alliance, because they want business leaders to be involved to make ecocide law so that it will be criminal to destroy nature. And this is something driven by a company on our platform. So this is the upside down. The company are giving love to the non-profit. But we have also a lot of private individuals on our platform, and this is a climate love from our user Muhammad to an organization called Rubicon, because what Rubicon is a company that actually has a solution to the waste problem using artificial intelligence, and that is something that needs to be implemented on scale in many cities. So if you log into the We Don't Have Time platform, you could give climate love wherever you see someone doing something great for the climate. And you could be inspired of so many other people around the world acting and working for change. We will never achieve systematic change without individual change. What's most important in order to achieve the systematic change is that if you do the change, you need to communicate it and inspire it to others to act. And that's why I try to do my best to live as climate friendly as possible. So that's why I love my solar panels, for instance. It's not the renewable energy that is the best thing with it. It's actually that everyone sees in my neighborhood that I have those panels, and that is communicating climate action and have them to think about it and have them to do the same. So just 2 months after I put up my solar panels, my neighbor house did the same, and now has many more followed. So my recommendation for your climate action is to do something you're good at, something you like. If you're interested in food, focus on that. If you're interested in buildings, focusing on that, etc., etc. I try to do a lot of things, not just solar panels. For instance, I haven't been traveled by airplane since I founded We Don't Have Time. So I only travel on the ground, by train, etc. I don't eat red meat. I sometimes eat meat, but I'm not an absolute list. And I think that is important, that you don't need to be perfect. No one is perfect. And actually, if you are perfect, that will scare people away, because they will feel that they can't take after your action. So by being imperfect, you will have more followers. It's impossible to live in a perfect climate-friendly lifestyle in the system we have today, but it's absolutely achievable to do the very best you can and have others to follow, and I totally recommend it. But it's not just climate action on our platform. We are also planting a tree for all new members signing up to our platform. And if you invite your friends, we will soon have a forest together that we will plant for you. Isn't that awesome? So if you want to do some change in the world, just give 5 minutes per day. Log in to We Don't Have Time. You will find the app in the App Store and Google Play and on the web. And do some social media activity that will make an impact. 5 minutes per day. If you do that, and if you talk to your friends to do the same, we will change the world together. Give climate love and save the world.
Before we start, I'd like to ask the viewers and even the teams of the guests that we have on this show to download the We Don't Have Time app at wedon'thavetime.org, and you'll be able to ask questions of the guests, you'll be able to post reviews, and you'll be able to connect with a network of over 60,000 organizations, institutions, investors and startup companies and individuals who are collectively generating about 50 million social engagement every month. Okay, this broadcast is a series. This is the fourth, as said, and the first one we had last year looked at carbon dioxide. Could it be recycled and rebrought back into the economy rather than being a headache causing climate change in the atmosphere, particularly with a price on carbon? Then we looked at wastewater. You may know there are many good things in wastewater that get lost and get flushed out through our rivers into our oceans, causing problems. Could those nutrients, those materials be brought back? That was our second show. The third show was fly ash. Many large, richer countries and middle-sized countries incinerate a proportion of their municipal waste. Are there things in that ash that could come back into the economy, be part of the circular economy story? The answer being yes. And here we are now with something that's probably one of the hottest topics in the waste story in the world, and that's plastic. We're going to hear from guests from a global perspective about plastics, and then, as we always do, go down into the regional level, which is Europe. And then we will also look at a country in the Scandinavian region, Sweden, to see how they are doing. And then in the second half of the show, we're going to have a look at some companies, including Ragn-Sells, who are trying to basically go from theory to practice. In other words, to bring waste plastics, some of the hard to recycle waste plastics, back into the economy with environmental benefits, economic benefits, and hopefully social benefits in terms of good green jobs. And we have two companies that will also talk about the challenges, in a sense, of trying to create markets and deliver markets for waste plastics. So we're looking forward to that in the second half of the show. Before we start with our first guest, I'd like to go to Pär Larshans from Ragn-Sells. Pär is head of sustainability at Ragn-Sells, and he's also an advisor to two ministries in Sweden. Pär, could you give us your perspective on why this is an important topic, plastics, why we're dealing with it today?
Thank you so much, Nick, and I totally agree. This is one of the hottest topics or the hottest material, I think, on the planet. Everybody talks about it, but it's also a blame game. Everybody points to someone else to solve the problem. And when it comes to circular solutions or circular material flows, what we have learned over the years is that collaboration will be the key factor to enable it. Well, I represent the recycling industry, and that's correct. Many say that we are the one that's going to bring back the resources. I agree, we can sort it out. We can make them accessible for others, but someone else needs to demand that we can also use it somewhere else. I really look forward to listening to this global perspective to understand how we can stop pointing on each other instead of agreeing how to solve the problem. So coming back after the session and with comments, and I really would like to see that we take a new direction going forward to create the circle flows and reduce the unnecessary waste of plastics in the world. Thank you, Nick. Over to you.
Thanks, Pär. So our first keynote speaker is Sheila Aggarwal-Khan, who's from the UN Environment Programme. She's director of the Economy Division, and she's based at UNEP's headquarters in Nairobi, Kenya. Sheila, it's lovely to have you on the show. We know that UNEP has been working for many years on the plastic story. trying to move nations, move the industry, move society towards a more intelligent handling of this huge global problem. And I know you've also been working on these very excellent reports with the Ellen MacArthur Foundation, the New Plastics Economy Global Commitment Progress Reports. Sheila, I wonder if you could give us just briefly at the beginning of your presentation, remind us all of the huge challenge of waste plastics and why it is a real issue that needs to be resolved. And then perhaps give us a glimpse into how your work as UNEP and with partners is trying to address this. Thank you.
Thanks, Nick. So, all of us, I think, whoever's gone to the beach, you look and see plastics, whether it's plastic bags or single-use plastic bottles on the beach. But forget even the beach. Nowadays, you see it on the streets, thrown everywhere. And that's just, let's say, the tip of the iceberg, because what you don't see are all the hidden impacts. If you were to look at the amount of plastic waste we're generating globally, the numbers come to something like 220 million tons of plastic waste generated. And our trends analysis is showing this is going to double by 2040 and probably double by 2050 from the 2040 figures. So it's the trends are just exponential in terms of the amount of plastic waste. Everybody's been talking about the Paris Agreement and, the commitments made at Glasgow. But then when you look at plastics and knowing, they come from oil and gas feedstock, you see the kind of emissions that are happening. So right now, we're only at about 3%. Some say, it's going to grow to 5 to 10%. But when you look at the full life cycle of plastics, the numbers jump to 15 to 20% of carbon emissions from plastics along their value chain between 2040 and 2050. Now, that's not even touching the health impacts, because there's lots of different types of chemicals in plastics to be used for different types of purposes. And then if you recycle that, you have all these different hazardous chemicals coming into the environment, affecting human health. And, we're seeing endocrine disruption, we're seeing, your hormone system at risk and all. And so if governments were to decide that actually the burden is on different players across the life cycle, we have calculated, and what we're seeing is that businesses would incur costs that are going to be about 100 billion in financial risks to the companies across the life cycle of plastics. On top of that, governments are losing out on being able to kickstart the economy. We're seeing a whole situation with COVID and, loss of jobs. The data shows you could create 700,000 jobs alone from a more circular economy. Right now, we definitely have a linear economy. And as Pär said, it's many different actors along that life cycle who have a role to play. If we're going to make a shift, we have to go to a more circular economy. So from a linear throwaway society type of economy to one where plastics are kept, circling in, and so that they don't reach the waste stream. We can't recycle our way out of the problem. We can't incinerate our way out of the problem. We have to look at solutions right from the point of polymer production, so the upstream side, all the way down to the packaging industry, to what consumers are buying, and to government's role in creating the incentives and the regulatory environment for a more circular economy. So this more, let's say, systemic shift and a transformation to a new plastics economy is already, making its way to date. The Global Plastics Economy Commitment, which was created as an alliance between Ellen MacArthur Foundation and UNEP in 2018, we saw, let's say, a growth of up to about 1,000 signatories right now in there. Governments plus industry actors. And those industry actors make about 20% of the global plastic packaging industry. And, they're making commitments to removing single-use plastics, their commitments about, reuse, repair and recycle plastics, looking at the trade implications of it. There are finance players in this, and they're looking at, how do they stop or divest from, investing in different parts of the plastic life cycle if it's not more, let's say, a circular economy approach. And so we're seeing quite a shift in this that would take lots of different actors along the value chain to be able to shift towards every step of the life cycle being able to, let's say, benefit from a more circular green economy.
Thanks, Sheila. I mean, as you point out, it's a massive topic, and it's really beyond a show of 1 hour like this to cover all the dimensions that are related to this plastic topic. We're trying to look a little bit into the issue of markets. How can government provide incentives for, better markets for the reuse of old plastic, even the hard to recycle ones, and substitute for virgin materials made from oil. But is there something that gives you optimism? I mean, I hope you sleep at night, but but I mean, do you think there is a way of achieving some kind of fully circular economy with this material or materials? Because it's so many different things. I mean, do you think from the reports you're seeing, you do see a little tick up in the reuse of waste plastics in new products? Obviously, there are alternatives as well to plastics. Are you seeing anything that gives you a bit of confidence?
So there are some nights that I don't sleep and I think, oh my God, especially when I look at my garbage and I think, how did I generate that much plastic? It's really quite interesting, when you're trying to look at what you're producing and then you look at all this plastic packaging and you think, okay, that's not going to be recycled and that's not, and that's not. And actually maybe 2 things out of all the plastics you have are going to be recycled. That's when I don't sleep very well. But actually, there is quite a bit of optimism out there. As you may know, there is a lot of member states. I think it's 2/3 of the member states globally we're seeing, according to WWF's Plastic Navigator, are showing that they are going to back a global plastics agreement at the UN Environment Assembly, which is coming up in a few weeks. And they're going to put forward a resolution asking for an agreement to be negotiated. We're also seeing a number of businesses, and this ranges from, the polymer producers to brands and retailers to banks and to institutional investors like pension funds and insurance agencies who are investing in and wanting to look to sustainability as a key principle in their core operations. And so we're seeing a lot of industry players backing the need for a global plastics agreement. What we're seeing is that if that global plastics agreement is to take on a circular economy approach, it has the potential to reduce plastics in the ocean, the waste, by something like 80% by 2040. We're seeing governments being able to save some 70 billion between now and 2040. In all kinds of other costs that are currently being incurred. We're seeing greenhouse gas emission reductions, savings that could be up to 25% of emission reductions, a good 700,000 jobs created from, whether it's, recycling, waste management and collection, to innovations in designs of new products. And an opportunity for business, an opportunity especially for front-runner businesses. And Nick, you mentioned the whole idea of government's role and what would this mean and the kind of regulatory environment so that the industry, has, let's say, potential for occupying a niche in a market because actually there's a requirement to have a certain amount of, let's say, recycled content. Whether it's, new material, etc. And, to be able to access that kind of plastic waste as feedstock from, what is basically turning it into a more circular economy approach. So, yes, very optimistic because I think that there's a lot of...
That's the main thing. Look, Sheila, thanks really very much for your time and thanks for coming in from Nairobi. And the line was great, so that's super. Thank you very much indeed. So I think what Sheila did there was also provide a perfect segue to our next guest, which is Erin Simon from the World Wildlife Fund in Washington. Erin is head of plastic waste and business at the World Wildlife Fund, known in the rest of the world as WWF. And, yes, sometimes an issue becomes so global, so pervasive around the world. You think of climate change, you think of trade in endangered species, you think of the Stockholm Convention on POPs, persistent organic pollutants, that governments decide there needs to be a global treaty. So, Erin, tell us a little bit more detail then, and building on what Sheila said, of what's going to happen at the UN Environment Assembly, which is the assembly of environment ministers around the world. It's it's their club, basically. This is where all the environment ministers come once a year. What are you anticipating at the end of February, beginning of March?
Yeah, we're only a few weeks away from that fifth session in Nairobi. And before I get into what we're hoping to see happen at that convening, I think it's important, like you said, to talk about why these agreements are so important. And that's because no major international issue has ever been tackled at scale without a global treaty. And that's because a global treaty is really more than just an agreement, right? It's a symbol of international alignment on a shared threat. And it's a binding commitment from nations around the world towards this common goal of really neutralizing that threat. A treaty at this level brings together a myriad of diverse perspectives and cultures to the table. And that really ensures that the proposed solutions are in the best interest of people, all people really, not just serving the needs of more developed nations. So especially when it comes to tackling the issues that plague our planet, individual country actions are just not enough, right? Atmospheres and oceans don't really adhere to those state lines, and therefore neither can our solutions on these global issues. Touching on some of those great examples that you mentioned, another successful global treaty that is already in practice is the Montreal Protocol, right? And this entered into force in 1989. The recovery of our ozone layer is one of the biggest environmental wins of the past few decades, right? And it began with countries coming together to listen to the data. So you'll see a lot of parallels to the plastic issue. In the 70s, scientists started calling attention to this immense threat that chemicals such as chlorofluorocarbons were posing on the atmosphere, really sort of depleting the ozone layer at a pretty frightening pace. And in the decade that followed, 197 countries signed and ratified an international agreement to phase out both the production and consumption of those substances. That global collaboration as a part of the Montreal Protocol continues to protect our atmosphere today. And there are just indicators that our ozone is actually now healing, which is great. You can also look at CITES, which is the Convention on International Trade in Endangered Species. That entered into force in 1975 with 183 countries signed on. Almost 50 years later, that treaty provides critical protections to almost 36,000 of our most vulnerable plant and animal species. And especially in an age where the transfer of zoonotic diseases at the top of everyone's mind, we already had this international agreement in place to crack down on the illegal trafficking of endangered species, and that's been vital, right? So without a global treaty in place, there would be no alignment between countries on how to tackle those hard issues. If we didn't have that unified approach today, we wouldn't have been able to face those issues at scale like we have been. And of course, we're talking today really about plastic. Sheila opened up with a lot of the impacts of this crisis that's become this ever-growing challenge that's emerged today at the top of the environmental agenda. We know there's a lot of plastic entering our oceans every year, about 11 million metric tons. That's about a dump truck a minute. It's impacting species and communities around the globe through ingestion and habitat destruction. And of course, we're on track, as Sheila mentioned, for growing numbers in the coming years, right? If we don't change the path we're on, if we continue business as usual. And we know that this isn't just an issue that's in one place. It's not limited to one region. It can be found everywhere, definitely on your sidewalk, Sheila, but also like all the way down to the depths of the Mariana Trench. So this issue doesn't belong to one region of the world. So therefore, if we're going to tackle the issue at scale, we need countries around the world to rally together for a solution. We simply can't depend on country-level policymakers to come up with individual solutions, especially if there's no agreed-upon international method for calculating discharge rates by country. To move a dial on a crisis, we need to be able to measure the same way in each country and make sure that's aligned. So if we can establish those metrics in an international agreement, for example, we can establish even just a baseline for progress, right? And that common framework and language can, if we don't have that, it really can limit our ability to problem solve at the speed and scale we need. And the same is true for business, right? We have seen in recent years that many of these large influential businesses are stepping up, right? They are doubling their initiatives to fight plastic waste, their goals, their targets, and yet plastic pollution continues to grow. So the problem is that these voluntary initiatives often lack sufficient support and scale to drive that meaningful systems change. And again, that lack of basic harmonized data at global, national, and of course, business levels limits the ability for us to even monitor the progress and evaluate the effectiveness of those measures. So what we need is to create better enabling conditions that will allow these businesses and policymakers to be successful. What we need, this is where like the global treaty can come in. An international treaty on plastic waste would coordinate stakeholder actions and help solve the global plastic pollution crisis at scale, addressing challenges stemming from the transboundary nature, really, of supply chains and waste streams. It would drive innovation and infrastructure development while supporting the development of those harmonized standards, common metrics, and methodologies. And then that would allow us to have global and national targets. So that really brings us back, right, to this upcoming fifth session of the UN Environment Assembly, which is taking place next month. And it is our hope, right, that all of that support and momentum that we were just talking about will lead to this convening of the 193 member states to agree to a debate this global treaty for plastic pollution. We just believe that that's the only way we can get to a world without plastic in nature, right? A world where our oceans are teeming with marine life and not the discarded bags, nets, bottles, and bags that it does today. So we think that global treaty is essential to addressing the growing plastic waste crisis at scale.
That's great. Thank you very much for that. And a small question with a big question, sorry, but a short answer. Who doesn't want a treaty on plastics? Would there be a certain sector of industry that might not be so keen?
You know, I think that there has been a large support even from oil and gas that we have seen, but what they want in a treaty is different from what I would say we need in a treaty. We need a treaty that addresses the whole supply chain, that looks at reductions from source all the way to redesigned, all the way to investment in waste management and infrastructure and recovery, right? And I think that there's a group of industries that really just want to focus on, let's just fix recycling. And I feel like while that's an important piece and really valuable in creating a circular system for materials, it's just not enough.
Yeah.
And so we need that global coordination across the entire value chain.
Super, Erin. Well, look, thank you very much indeed for being on the show. And best of luck for all the great work you're doing for this treaty in late Feb, early March. Hopefully early March we'll get a result. Yeah. Thank you very much indeed. So, as we say, we go from the global, and it's a big world out there, but it's also a big world in Europe as well. And we're going to go down to the regional level of Europe. I'm very pleased to have David Rogers with us, who's head of international programs for WRAP, which is based in the UK, but been very involved in both the European and the global stories on issues like food waste and fashion waste and many other areas like that. WRAP is the Secretariat of the European Plastics Pact. And there's a lot going on in Europe, which David will touch on, whether it be the circular economy work with the European Commission and Union and so on and so forth. So David, tell us, what is the pact? How's it going? Is Europe getting its act together?
Thanks, Nick. And yes, in a word, I believe it is. So WRAP has been working on the issue of plastics and trying to take plastics out of the waste and into the economy for about 20 years. And as a result of that, in 2018, with the Ellen MacArthur Foundation, we launched the UK Plastics Pact. And that has captured the imagination of people all around the world and has become the model for a number of plastic pacts all around the world, on every continent, which form part of the Ellen MacArthur Foundation global network of plastics pacts. And we were really pleased to be asked to provide the Secretariat for the European Plastic Pact, which launched in 2020. And it's the first time that one of these voluntary agreements had attempted to be formed across multiple countries, multiple governments and multiple businesses with supply chains across a whole continent. And I'm pleased to say that we're making really excellent progress. So the European Plastic Pact has 150 signatories from 21 European countries, including 15 national governments and some sub-regional governments as well. And the members spread right across the whole supply chain. So we have plastics producers and recyclers, retailers, manufacturers, brands, as well as NGOs, governments, municipalities. And bringing all of those people together helps us to see exactly where the issues are in the plastics value chain and identify the solutions that can really make the biggest impact. So the 4 targets of the European Plastic Pact are all about removing non-recyclable plastic from the economy, making sure that every bit of plastic packaging which gets produced is fully reusable or recyclable, increasing the amount that's collected and effectively recycled, and creating a demand for all of that by increasing the amount of recycled content in new packaging. And the Plastic Pact is set up so that we have technical experts and businesses working together to do all sorts of things like harmonise the guidance on what is recyclable across Europe, what kind of infrastructure is needed to really collect and get all of the material that we need for recycling back into the system so that it doesn't go to waste, but actually gets turned into something really useful and valuable. And with all of that energy from so many different people, we're making real progress. And this year we'll see the first set of technical guidance being published and disseminated through webinars and events, hopefully physical events, so that many, many more businesses across Europe can see what they can do to make a real change. And we know from the UK experience, we're a few years into the process in the UK, but we know from our measurements of progress that we've been able to take over 1 billion items that were non-recyclable and make them recyclable, take over another 1 billion items completely out of the market altogether. These are big numbers that make a real difference to the world. And we hope that this model can be scaled up and work right across Europe and right across the world.
Right. Briefly, David, I don't know, what is the level of recycled content right now in plastic products in Europe? And is there some upper target that we're going for? Or
Yeah, so it's less than 10% across all polymers at the moment. Obviously, PET has a higher recycled content generally across the board than some of the other polymer types. But we are looking at a target of 30% recycled content across the market, across Europe, which would make a real demand. And we've seen the impact of this, actually. The price for recycled PET has recently spiked because the demand from largely bottle manufacturers for recycled content to meet those targets that they've signed up to on national and international commitments has really driven a demand and a price rise. And this is an example of the circular economy in practice. There's now a reason for collectors and recyclers to invest in the equipment needed to get that material and provide it into that market. And if we can see that spread out through other polymer types, we'll get this real pull through that creates a circular economy, which will make everything a lot easier for businesses to invest in making the changes that will take plastic out of the environment and keep it back in the economy. And as Erin said, having a global treaty, having international commitments really does drive that action on the ground.
Yeah. And of course, a global treaty creates norms and standards everywhere. I mean, that's one of the basic things about a treaty, is that it also should create a level playing field across every country. Although some may go faster and some may go slower, there is a basic understanding of the norms and standards of what people need to do. And I think that's also very important for a treaty. David, look, thank you so much indeed for being on our show, and congratulations with what RAP is doing. We've gone from the European stage, we've gone from the global stage to the European stage. Now we're going to go to a national stage, and we're very delighted to have Åsa Stenmarck. I understand you're a materials flow expert, Åsa, at the Swedish Environmental Protection Agency. Could you tell me a little bit about what Sweden's doing? You have a roadmap. Is that just aligned with Europe, or do you have little bells and whistles on top, which are all your own in Sweden? Please, you have the floor.
Thank you so much, Nick. Thank you for letting me present our roadmap. So what we do have some bells on the top. But first, let me say that I'm responsible, not only being a material flow expert, which is broad enough, but I'm responsible for the National Plastic Coordination, which is an initiative that the Swedish government has given to us, or an assignment given to us, in order to create knowledge around sustainable plastic use, and also, and maybe more important, to create cooperation on how we could reach a more sustainable plastic use in Sweden. And when we started to set up this sort of, I don't know even what to call it, this sort of little organization that we are running, we talked to a lot of stakeholders, because we are aiming to reach out to everyone except for households. And almost all of them said that, okay, this is fine, and we do really want to work with this. We can see a lot of engagement in this issue, but also the fact that we don't really know where we're heading. What is really a sustainable plastic use? So maybe to link to previous speakers here, what could a global treaty? What should it be? What's the goal of a global treaty? When do we know when we're done, so to speak? And to be able to answer that question, we thought that this roadmap, a common goal and a roadmap for how to get there, was a good way of sort of aligning all kinds of Swedish actors, both private and public organizations, and everyone that want to could basically use this roadmap. And so we have come up with, we launched last year in May, and we have a common goal, which is one sentence full of all the buzzwords you need when you talk about sustainable plastic use. And that is plastic use in the right applications, in resource efficient, climate effective, non-toxic and circular flows, and of course with a minimum of leakage. So yeah, all the buzzwords, right? But to make this more graspable, we have also divided our roadmap into 4 different, what we call effect areas. And they are production and raw material with the least environmental impact as possible, resource smart usage, reduced plastic leakage into nature, and then of course significantly increased and high quality material recycling. And I think it was Sheila who mentioned that we cannot only work with only recycling in a treaty, for example. We need to work with this whole sort of range of solutions in order to get there. And this is also the main message from us, that please look into the roadmap. It's also available in English, actually, by the way, if you're not that familiar with Swedish, which is understandable if you're not. And look into it, find some inspiration, and we are pretty sure that everyone can do something from their point of view or their perspective to be able to help out on this way.
Mm. Do you have a target also in Sweden for the amount of substitution of, say, virgin plastics in products? Is there a...
No, we don't. We have targets, common EU targets on recycling, on packaging, and on construction and building and construction materials, for example. We do have, which not all EU member states have, a goal on reusable packaging. And in other terms, we have gone a little bit further than EU directives, but no such goal as reducing plastic. But we are signatories to the Plastic Pact, so of course we want to align with those goals as well.
So my last question on this area before we go to the next section of the show is, so is there some process within the European Union to set a target on what proportion of plastic products sold will have a recycled element? Is there any process in the European Union, at the Commission, whatever level, to do that?
I believe there are 2 different ways of doing it, and I think it might be happening on both. So the first one being the packaging directive, and actually Swedish government tried to suggest this in the national legislation of a goal of 30% of all packaging, but not food packaging and medical packaging, because those are special. But then there's also the EU products initiative and products legislation revision going on, and maybe we will see similar things on other product groups. We've done a little bit of an investigation on that in Sweden, and found out that this is a really good policy instrument. It sort of drives the market, as also David mentioned. It really drives the market. But it's sometimes kind of hard to set the right level, and also we found out, for example, that in construction products there are other legislation that you then also have to revise in order to make it possible to put such goals from a national point of view. But I think it will come.
Thank you very much indeed, and thanks to all the guests that were in the first half of the show. And that was really fascinating. Thank you very much. You're all very welcome to stay on and listen if you wish to, or if you've got to do something urgent, then that's fine. Thank you very much indeed. Now we're going to hear from three companies. We're going to hear from three companies who are really working at the cutting edge of trying to make this circular economy work, including with difficult plastics, which in the past perhaps have been somehow hard to take from the waste stream and then turn into material that could be brought back into new plastic products. And that's one of the companies here. That's Ragn-Sells we're going to hear from. And then we're going to hear from two other companies, ESE and Scanlux, where they are, in a sense, using some of the harvesting of this new process that Ragn-Sells has, but also have their own deep insights into this complicated topic of how you create a circular plastics economy. And I do want to hear about plastic raincoats versus plastic bottles at some moment, gentlemen, and also other interesting stories about the complexity of our waste streams and our supply chains and so on. But first, before we go to that, we've got a message from the Danish Environment Minister. That's Wermelin. She's the Environment Minister, of Denmark. And she was actually in COP26 in Glasgow. And this interview was recorded with her on plastics, and also calling for, in fact, more markets for waste plastic products.
About half of the world's total carbon emissions and 90% of its loss of biodiversity is caused by the extraction and processing of natural resources. Ultimately, the products we use become waste. It is imperative that the throwaway society becomes a phenomenon of the past. We need to reduce our amount of waste and limit the use of natural resources by transitioning to a circular economy. We can all agree that the way we currently live our lives is not sustainable, but the changes we all want and need to see are not easily implemented. As an example, let us look at plastic. Plastic is used abundantly for its versatility and durability and can occasionally be the greener solution. Wrapping or packing certain food items in plastic packaging increases shelf lives and thereby reduces food waste. However, plastic is currently overused, and much of it ends in our oceans, our forests, and in our streets. The incineration of plastic waste is the main source of carbon emission in the waste sector in Denmark. As the Minister of Environment of Denmark, I'm doing my utmost to change this regrettable state. We're working on exceeding the already ambitious plastic policies. The plastic challenge does not respect borders and cannot be solved by any individual nation state. We need to collaborate internationally, and I've promoted for Denmark to take an active part of the initiation of the European Plastics Pact. In this pact, countries and businesses are leading the way with clear and ambitious goals, focusing on design, responsible use, recycling capacity, and the use of recycled content. What we need is to work faster, collaborate more, and share our experiences. That is what the European Plastics Pact is all about. Another successful example of cooperation between public sector and business sector is the Danish climate partnerships. The Danish government has initiated 14 climate partnerships with the business community. The purpose of the partnerships was to establish a 2030 vision for the sector's contribution to the national target of 70% carbon reduction. My vision is for Denmark to be a front-runner in finding solutions for sustainable transition of our society. And I believe it is possible because of our strong collaborations between the Danish government and the Danish business community. We have public-private partnerships around the use of plastic in the following 4 sectors: agriculture, construction, food services and retail. These are all sectors with the potential for increasing recycling and reducing plastic waste. The partnerships are voluntary and raise the bar by setting goals specific to each sector. Additionally, we have set a goal of reducing waste from takeaway packaging by half before 2026. I hope that these public-private partnerships will set a tone that fosters an entrepreneurial spirit, creating novel and creative technological solutions for a greener and cleaner world. And I intend to deepen the already existing fruitful public-private partnerships and hopefully develop new ones in the future. Because I believe that collaboration and exchange of knowledge is the key to succeed in building a circular economy where responsible use of natural resources spans the entire value chain from extracting to reuse and recycling for the benefit of all of us. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much indeed, Minister, for recording that and being on our circular table talks. Now let us turn to Massimo Forti, who is the CEO of Ragn-Sells in Denmark. Massimo, will you tell us a bit about this Fair Plastic initiative that you're involved in? And also tell us a little bit about this new process that Ragn-Sells has developed to try and deal with maybe some of these harder to bring back waste plastics. How is that going? And where do you see it developing over the months and years to come?
Perfect. Yes, thank you, Nick. Of course, like 5-6 years ago, we started dealing with a lot of plastic coming from packaging waste. And we said, how comes every time we reuse this organic waste, we produce a lot of plastic that actually goes only for incineration? And so let's see if we can start to a journey to recycle that. And that was actually, from a technical point of view, very complicated. It still is complicated. But then we also realized that there is a lack of awareness generally in the society, but not only the society, also when it comes to actually the guys buying all the plastic using for packaging. That there is a huge difference between plastic that has been recycled for the past 30 years because it is closed loops or a very monostream clean plastic versus the one that we remove from the food waste. So in order to start that campaign and increase awareness on that, and of course also the demand, we prepare a short video that I hope you could show now that explain very, very good what is the idea behind Fair Plastic.
50% of plastic packaging must be recycled by 2025. Since day one, the linear economy has postponed the very consequences of our plastic production and handling, leaving us with a mountain of problems. Of all the plastics ever produced, we have only managed to recycle 9%. 12% is incinerated. The rest is left behind somewhere. And the mountain is growing with an expected doubling of plastic usage within the next 30 years. In Denmark, 30% of all plastic waste is recycled. It's clean and uniform types of plastic waste that has been recycled in solid processes for decades. It's all good, but it's clearly not the answer to the plastic plague. The vast majority of the global plastic waste is mixed and dirty. Only few wants to touch it, and with good reason. The linear economy has made it unprofitable to recycle. Instead, we let our beloved Earth pay for the enormous consequences. In the EU, the total demand for recycled plastic is less than 10%, and guess from which source? That's not fair. We have to ask ourselves, where would all the remaining plastic waste end up if we also demanded these resources to be used in the new plastic products? There is no need to throw money into the ocean or burn great resources. Fair Plastic is a mechanical recycling of these untapped resources. And with strong partnerships and value chains, we can ensure a safe way back for these resources into all kinds of new plastic products. The result is a sustainable circular solution, creating huge CO2 savings. But the effort is worthless without your demand of this recycled plastic. In fact, there's no point in collecting or sorting plastic waste at all if it only leads to a dead end. Don't be the missing link in the crucial circular process. The challenges we've created together, we must also solve together. Ask for Fair Plastic today and buy your own plastic waste. Again, and again, and again.
Okay, Massimo, thanks very much indeed. So, tell us where you're going from here then. You've set up, in a sense, the problem and the challenge. So what do we do now?
Exactly. What do we do now? One, we still must continue increase awareness on it. And I really like the example that, we all of us, we like to sort. We have an opinion about it. When we go to the shop and buy any kind of toilet brush, we look for the cheapest one and not for the one made of recycled material. And that's a responsibility that all of us we have. But saying that, now there is still one big journey that remains. And actually we have to look to that into two perspectives. When we work with recycled plastic, the one we just showed in the video, this product is not as homogeneous as virgin plastic. What does it mean? That we have an entire plastic industry that actually must be willing to change the entire way of producing, the entire setup. They have to do actually huge investment in order to be able to use this non-homogeneous product. So a shift within the plastic industry from the one point of view. At the same time, there is a need of a change in the legislation, because although the plastic industry maybe is willing to use the plastic, the waste, or the plastic that comes from waste, they may perhaps not allowed to do that. Today, many of the plastic producers are actually not allowed to work with plastic from waste. So we need actually to highlight or to change our rules, or to find a simple way to allow many more players in the market actually to use the waste plastic or the plastic from waste. And that's still a challenge.
Yeah. So, Massimo, but you've developed some way of getting some plastic back, which was not coming back before, right? I think it's a mechanical process with pellets. Why is that special? Is that a step in the right direction, do you think?
I think that is for sure a step in the right direction. We have succeeded in producing some pellets that can be used. It can be used in a loop that is coordinated. Now I know the next two companies, they will go more into detail about it, because they know how complicated it is. So they have to adapt themselves also in how to use the pellets that we produce.
Mm-hmm. And the pellets you produce come from where? What is the waste that you're bringing back to the economy?
We bring back all the packaging that is around the food waste. The waste that is normally not sold in the shops comes to us. We use it to produce biogas. But the byproduct is both glass, metals, and plastic, mainly plastic. And this is what we want to recycle instead of sending for incineration, which is the norm today.
Right. And in most parts of the world, this plastic gets incinerated or gets put in landfill. And with the technique you've got, there may be a way of spreading this culture of a new way of dealing with that waste to improve, the circular economy rates in Europe, but maybe even further, yeah?
I believe yes, and I haven't found any other doing this process so far. So yes.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you very much indeed, Massimo. And let's now go to Morten Cortsen, who is the CEO of Scanlux in Denmark. Morten, we had a little chat the other day about some of the products that you're making, and and some of the circular principles that you're incorporating into your plastic products. Tell us a little bit about the products you make, and also tell us a little bit why, at the end, why is it such a good idea for PET bottles be turned into raincoats? Sorry, I just had to ask you that question because I think it's rather fascinating. But tell us about it, and tell us about this process that Ragn-Sells has got. Is it useful? Is it helping you with target setting?
Thank you very much, Nick. For us, it's extremely useful. Primarily, what we do is we're selling garbage bags for households and municipalities. And we have always been using recycled plastics, but in a different shape than fair plastic, meaning we pretty much used whatever waste was available. Right now, what Massimo and Ragn-Sells is doing is they are bringing out an even deeper layer of difficulty to the market, meaning that they take out some plastic that was usually burned, they take away the food waste, and they make pellets that we can use. However, as Massimo said, it's not easy. Right now, we can only use a certain percentage in each bag. However, that number of pellets in percentage being used is growing rapidly. We started up at around 20%. We're now in the direction of 40, 45, even 50, depending on the product range. The reason why we adapted the pellets from Ragn-Sells, besides the environmental factor, besides the good marketing issue, because in our perspective, environment is also marketing. We have to distribute the communication in order for this to grow in the right direction. One of the reasons that we took in this product is because the story of circular economy, I used to refer to this as religion. There are so many different ways of understanding and interpreting this. And that is why the add-on from Ragn-Sells is for us just another chapter in the story. It may not be perfection, but it's guiding us in the direction of perfection. Meaning, Ragn-Sells supplies us with things that stay circular. Meaning, if it and this is the way you made the introduction with the PET bottles and the raincoats, just to get that one clarified immediately, is the fact that when, let's say, me and or my wife goes down to a shop in the nearby city and buys a raincoat, and it says in the window, made from PET bottles, then in general, we believe that we're doing a good job. However, what we're doing is we're taking PET bottles out of the PET bottles waste loop, meaning that when the raincoat is no longer of use, we bring it to eventually getting burned. If we, instead of buying that raincoat, we're not buying it so that the PET bottles could remain PET bottles. Then the circular flow would be even better. Because a PET bottle, don't get me on the numbers, but instead of just being reused 7.8 times, then we can now go up to 14% if we don't use PET bottles for anything else than PET bottles. So if plastic is made for a garbage bag, it has to die as a garbage bag, not as a raincoat or something else.
Yeah, I'm glad you said that, because I think, the average consumer out there is pretty confused. And if they see something like a raincoat made out of PET bottles, think, I'm doing a good job. I'm now buying a coat made out of this, rather than something that's made out of, something else that they think is more environmentally damaging. And there seems to be a lot of awareness needed among consumers about what's going on. This is not beyond this show, in a sense, here right now, but that's another story in itself. But I suppose what you're saying is, we were talking at the beginning about the global story, but when you look at the kind of, local, sort of say Scandinavian story, what you're saying is you need circularity in every player in the story, and you need stability and predictability of supply of these products, whether they be PET bottles or whether it be what Ragn-Sells is producing, which is these pellets from food packaging waste, right? You need a security of supply in a sense. You need to know it's always coming, right? And then you can work with that. Is that sort of right, or is that?
It is right. From our perspective, now in the beginning of this show, there were some global points of view, which are great. They have to go down the life cycle and end up by the consumer. We start in the other end. And when we go to the consumer and say, if you are buying these garbage bags from Scanlux based on pellets from Ragn-Sells, then you're adding onto this circular flow. So there are, I mean, in order to meet in the middle, we have some, in this case, ladies from Ghana and America presenting the global perspective, and then Massimo and I, we can do the more local perspective. And in Scanlux case, we can even bring it down to the, municipality or even end user. So, I mean, if we do a push-pull, then we eventually will meet in the middle. And that's why we believe that the perspective and the product that Ragn-Sells is producing has a high positive impact on plastic waste throughout, starting from our point, local, and then hopefully ending up global. So this is one of many chapters in the book, or religions in the wider scale that we are trying to promote. And what we buy into from Ragn-Sells is the fact that it is no longer waste is no longer waste. Waste is now a resource, and Ragn-Sells is by far, from our perspective, and we are doing business with many European companies in this. Ragn-Sells is by far the one that goes deepest into, I mean, facing the most difficult problem here by not just buying some plastic bottles or something else and making it easy. They take out the food waste, they do all the cleaning, and they bring it back. So, I mean, this, when it comes to a bigger scale, will definitely have an impact. Definitely. Yeah. That's why Scanlux is proud supplier of fair plastics.
All right, Morten. Well, thank you very much indeed for your perspective. And now, last but not least of our guests is Reinier den Boer, who's a product development and marketing manager at ESE in the Netherlands. And again, like Morten, I had a little chat with our last guest, and he taught me things about municipal waste bins that I'd never even heard of, and was quite fascinating. Reinier, you have the floor. Give us your perspective on a little bit on what Ragn-Sells are doing, and in terms of bringing materials back, and the challenges you face in this circular economy in terms of the stability you have to bring to a certain very specific product, which is living most of its life in a war zone.
Yes, thank you, Nick, for this introduction, and thank you for having me. As I said, I'm the product development director of ESE and PWS, and PWS is the local organization we have in Denmark and Scandinavia, a Pär waste system. And just to give a small insight in the products we are talking about, we are manufacturing 2- and 4-wheel bins, plastic bins for curbside collection. And many people know that for the sorting of waste. So we are an integral part of the waste supply chain. We are collecting the waste at the municipalities, or we're providing the collection means. But at the end, we are collecting materials in our products. And that is where a very interesting dynamics is starting, of materials being collected in something made out of a certain material. We create and we manufacture quite a lot of bins. It's passing millions of bins, more than 4 million bins a year. That means that we're also using a lot of plastic. We're processing tens of thousands of tons of plastics per year. So theoretically, we could be part of the problem we have been discussing in this session. But luckily, we started about 20 years ago in learning about using recycled materials. And we started very small, a few percentages of recycled materials, until this point where we are today, where we can create bins out of 98% of recycled materials. Often these are bins that come back from the market, so we can make new bins from old bins. We have made material research where we could prove that these bins could be reused, reproduced, recycled over 10 times. And if you look at the life cycle of a bin, 8 to 10 years. We're talking about a material cycle of 80 to 100 years that we could theoretically create. So that's a very interesting stage where we already are. But before we talk about the further potential, and I think we still have a lot of potential, especially linking to the Ragn-Sells metaphor of the first and the second pile of material, the pile of material that is mixed and has to be cleaned, sorted before it can be used. I would like to say that the circular economy vision starts actually at the drawing board. Each product we make starts with thinking about how can we increase the lifetime of a bin even more. For example, can we make bins adaptive? For example, when the legislation in a country changes, instead of collecting one fraction at a household, collecting multiple fractions, 2 up to 10 waste fractions, like we see in Denmark happening at this moment. There are a lot of changes, but how can you make sure that products that are placed collecting a certain waste fraction are being relevant when legislation changes, when the waste fraction changes? Can the colors change with it of the fraction indication? Can we split a bin in multiple volumes? Can we make it more ergonomic when the needs are changing of the end user? That is what we're taking up in the very first sketch, and we are making the bins adaptive to increase the lifetime. Can we increase the lifetime of 8 years or 10 years towards maybe 20 years of relevance? And that also touches on refurbishing existing bins. We can collect used bins and recycle them, but we can also try to refurbish the existing bins in the market by giving them new functionality that links to the new needs. When we cannot do that, can we at least repair bins that might be broken? We are in a very, like you described, Nick, these bins are operating in a war zone. It's plastic against steel and hydraulics of the trucks that are emptying these bins every day. So we have a lot of mechanical requirements on the materials that we use. So it's not easy to find just the material that is suitable for this job. But when a bin breaks, can we repair it? If we cannot repair it, can we reuse parts like the wheels or the axles and bring them in new products back to the streets? And then when we cannot do that anymore, can we then recycle the materials? And that is what we are doing. But that's just, that is where we are now, but we are touching on the first pile. We are using homogeneous material of bins. And the challenge is there to use the second pile. Like Massimo already explained, Ragn-Sells is focusing on the second pile of fair plastics. And we started cooperating there. And that is also what was said completely in the beginning by Sheila. We have to seek for cooperations. I'm convinced that no company can create a circular economy on its own. You have to innovate in the supply chain. You have to develop the value chain together. And for this, you need to go to a situation where there's the boundaries between suppliers and manufacturers and customers are fading, because everybody is each other's customer and supplier. When we source material from a customer that is collecting the waste and we source back the bins, we're creating short cycles to the market. So this is a very interesting topic, and we actually managed to use materials coming from the second pile together with a close cooperation with Ragn-Sells, even with some products up to 50% now. And that is really impressive, because when we started this, we said, oh, we really have to start with baby steps. We really have to research and discover what is possible on an industrial level, because we are talking about industrial production. And these materials, we cannot use any material. We can use a certain type of material in these products to deliver us the mechanical properties that we need for this environment. And we managed to step by step develop that material into something that is very well usable in this type of products. And I think what is maybe even more important is that we can create a very tangible circle where materials are collected at households in a region in Denmark. They are processed in Denmark, and we can create products that go back to that same region. And then we can explain to the people why their effort to sort these plastics really matters. Huh? And then we can, we can adopt this kind of material into a material chain that, explain, can last for decades. And that is our shared vision, let's say.
Yeah. No, I thought it was really interesting what you were saying, and you know that you can't really muck around with these bins. I mean, in Scandinavia, they're sometimes facing temperatures of -18 or even colder, and if it's the wrong material or if it hasn't been the wrong kind of plastic, hasn't been tested, they crack and break, and you don't want that because then you've got a mess all over the streets. But as you said, you know, you opened up your eyes to the idea that basically maybe Ragn-Sells had plastic pellets that came from a different kind of plastic to what you normally use, and a different way, blown plastics versus molded plastics. Is that right? I have to get this try and right in my head. But whatever it is, you were basically saying this waste stream of plastic, we don't really use that. Ragn-Sells are saying, well, actually, yeah, we've got pellets that come from that waste stream. You're thinking, oh, hold on a second, but we normally use this plastic, but let's give it a go. And I think it's that kind of, you know, leap of faith as well in testing something new that maybe then sets a challenge to other companies in this sphere to say, well, maybe we should see, maybe we can use it too. You know, the old ways don't have to be the new ways. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, these types of materials challenge everybody in the chain. There's no easy way. There's just a way of trial and making steps. And like you said, the packaging materials are often, for example, bottles, milk bottles, shampoo bottles, often blow molded materials, and we are using an injection molding process. And you have to imagine that in a blow molding process, you basically create some kind of a balloon shape to create a bottle, and you need certain process characteristics for that. And if you make an injection molding product, you actually need the material to flow like water. This is completely different kind of materials that we use, even though the name is the same of the material. Mm-hmm. And that is giving a lot of challenges to us, both in mold techniques, processing techniques, building experience, but also in the interaction with our partners in the chain to get the correct material that can withstand the -18 degrees and also withstand the heat, for example, in the Far East. The range of these temperatures is so high that we really have to be very critical on the materials. Yeah. We have to get there, even though the material is not so logic for us to use.
Got you. Yeah. So we're going to thank you very much indeed, and thank you to all the guests that have been on the show. I thought that this is a very interesting topic, and one that basically we can only touch on in some ways, because there's obviously some deeper dives into this all over the place. But I think it got over the idea that there is movement, both within the industry and also within the policymakers to try and go a bit further and faster on this. Pär Larshans, my co-host, my co-moderator, who's sat there patiently listening to all these fascinating presentations, give us a sense of what you feel that you might have learned that's a bit fresh from what you even knew with your great experience before we started the show.
Yes, thank you, Nick. I do think it's very impressive that we have a global agreement very soon. It is a good way to highlight the topic. And what, as has been said in the beginning, that we have never solved an environmental problem if we haven't been able to agree on global level. So that's a very good start. And yes, I think it's a good symbol for overall. It really points out that business together with other authorities really highlight that this is of importance. And on the other side, I know that what have been said also, that we confirm what we already know, that collaboration is a key factor, collaboration cross value chain, and we need to work in a new way. But to be honest, and I agree here with Morten, we need to change how we source. We need to think what we source from. David raised the question about the PET bottles and that the prices are booming. And I understand why. We have the forerunners, the circular forerunners that would like to source circular. And they believe, wow, here we have a circular source. We have PET. But to be honest, they are destroying that circular source if they are producing other things that aren't recycled. So it's very important that you make sure that you understand what source do we have, where can we source from, and what will the consequence be. So in fact, that will increase the carbon emissions. And I briefed both Reinier and Morten. That's exactly what they are doing. They are trying to not source from what has been circular. They are trying to create new ways of producing their products. And I remember when I met Massimo the first time 6 years ago, there was just a couple of percent of his very difficult plastic that could be used. There were very many people that were afraid of using reused plastics. And now I hear here from Morten about that it's possible to use 50% when they are producing the bins. So I would like to stress the importance that now consumers, businesses, municipalities start to procure, to use things that has been produced with recycled origin, like the bins. Then we will create a market. Then we will not need to see that we have huge amount of plastics that are ending up in incineration or even are spread into our oceans. So I think this is a very, very important step. I know that and I would like to comment also from the Danish side, and it was not mentioned by the minister, but that know that they are really a forerunner. They have decided to implement a recycling quote on plastics, and I think they are first in Europe to do that. And if we're going to do change, if we're going to change the society, we need to have forerunners, and Denmark, I believe, is one of them. But to conclude, yes, we need to take away how if we use PET bottles or PET plastics to other things than what it was created for. That is my
good point. And let's see what happens with, I think it was the packaging directive that also was talking about from the Swedish Environmental Protection Agency. Maybe there could be something at the level of Brussels to set some pretty rigorous target for the use of waste plastics in new products.
Well, what we have seen when it comes to phosphorus is another example on a totally other value chain, is that Germany, they has become a forerunner when it comes to phosphorus recovery. And that is now also being developed in Europe. I think if Denmark, as I said in the beginning, I think if Denmark can be the forerunner for plastics, that demonstrates that it's possible to use very difficult plastics as well. I think that's a very good start. And we need countries to be forerunners. We need to do it in all countries in Europe in the end.
Yeah, good point. Yeah, you always need a leader and then others follow when they see the others actually can pull it off. Yeah. Good. Well, look, thank you very much indeed. It's been a great show. It's been great to partner with Ragn-Sells again on an interesting topic of the circular economy. Again, to the viewers and the audience, remember to download WeDon'tHaveTime.org, the app, and then you can ask some questions of the guests and also post reviews from what you see and hear on this and many, many other important climate and environmental topics. And please watch the social media feeds of We Don't Have Time and Ragn-Sells so we can then inform you in advance what our next topic is going to be for Circular Table Talks 5. Thank you very much indeed.